Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Cherie Hirsch, and I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for Arctic IT. And with me today, we have Matt Borkowski, our Director of Business Application Sales, and Robert Hemmen, who is our Chief Executive Officer for Chehalis Tribal Enterprises. So before I turn over the presentation to Matt and Rob, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. The presentation will be recorded and you will receive a link to the recording a day after the webinar concludes. We've scheduled this for about an hour, so we'll have time for questions at the end. But if you do have any along the way, please go ahead and put those in the questions panel at any time, and I'll be monitoring those as they come in. You'll also notice we loaded a copy of this presentation into the materials section of your GoToWebinar control panel. So please be sure to download that before the webinar concludes, as it will not be available afterwards. Thanks again for joining us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Rob.
All right, thank you, Cherie, and thank you everyone for attending today. This was something that I think it was NAFOA last year, Robert, you had said, it'd be great to do sort of a high-level AI presentation at RES or NAFOA or something like that, just to help tribal leaders just navigate how to get started or understand more about what AI is. So with that, we've come to this point, so excited to be presenting with you today. As Cherie said, I'm the Director of Business Application Sales at Arctic IT. I've been with Arctic IT for 20 years now and have spent most of that time implementing technology for our tribal nations and tribal business customers.
And I'm Robert Hemmen. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Chehalis Tribal Enterprises. The Chehalis Tribe is located in the state of Washington. We're about halfway between Seattle and Portland off of I-5. We manage for the tribe a family of tribal non-gaming businesses. We have 3 end-of-the-trail fueling center convenience stores. One is a travel plaza on I-5. We're currently developing 5 to 8 additional travel centers and fueling centers over the next 5 years. We have a civil and fiber optic construction company, a golf course, a 106-acre blueberry farm, commercial real estate division. We manage a lot of tribal land for economic development. We have a Fairfield Inn and Suites, a Pilot Flying J truck stop, Talking Cedar Restaurant, and then Talking Cedar Brewery and Distillery, which is the 5th largest craft brewery in the state of Washington and the largest craft distillery in the state of Washington.
Well, very good. Again, glad to be presenting with you today. As we take a look at our agenda, today we'll be covering these 5 things, starting with just some quick basics about AI. Real-world examples of how tribes and native-owned organizations are making use of AI. Just talk briefly about how that can align with community goals and not where AI isn't necessarily separate from those as we sometimes see. Then Robert and I are going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes or so diving into just some of the myths, both what is maybe a little true and not true about some of the most common myths that we hear when discussing AI. And then as time allows, we'll dive into where to begin, some pitfalls to avoid, and other recommendations for getting started with and utilizing AI throughout your organizations. And we'll make sure to have a few minutes for Q&A at the end. So as Cherie said, throughout, please use that the question panel to submit those in, and we will cover those at the end. So with that, Robert, why don't you give us, just to start off with a brief introduction to AI.
I thought the easiest place to start is just the Wikipedia definition of what AI is. Artificial intelligence refers to the development of computer systems capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as reasoning, learning, decision-making, and perception. First came computers, right? Computers are really just dumb hardware. Then you had software designed to make computers run. Now, computers are rules-based. What they do is they execute predefined instructions, and they require certain human interaction to work. Now, AI is the next evolution from computers and software. AI is machine learning. It can analyze patterns, make predictions, and make decisions automatically. It's a more advanced form of software that mimics human reasoning. But always remember, though, that it's artificial intelligence. It has its limitations, which we will talk about a little bit in this discussion.
So when we look at AI, there are different types, or where it's broken down into different categories. So just spending a few minutes to talk about those different categories. First and foremost, there's generative AI. And for a lot of us, that's what we first think about when we think of AI. The ability to create content for us, summarize our emails, things for us, and just use some prompts or ask questions and have it give us some information back. ChatGPT really brought that to the forefront originally here a few years ago, and there's been a lot that has happened since with that. Then we have predictive AI, and that's more based off of analyzing data and then giving you different types of trends or predictions of what may happen based upon data models, things that it has learned from analyzing that data. A perceptive AI takes real world data and turns it into structured information. One of the most common usage of this would be meetings recordings or other aspects like that, where we're talking back and forth and creates real good summaries of what's happening about those meetings, takes notes and things for us, where it's perceiving things that are going on, maybe describing what's happening on a video, that sort of thing, to make that data maybe a little more usable than the normal unstructured aspect that we have of that. And then finally, where there's a huge growth now, we're seeing this in various systems, is agentic AI. I like to think of agentic AI as similar to like an intern or a junior employee that you train to do a specific task and to do it really well. They know what you train it to do. They will create the output that you're asking it to do based upon different things that are happening, and really diving in to be that agent that is performing that specific task. And I know Robert here at the bottom really just tried to take some of what I've been saying and make it simple, so he threw those different boxes across the bottom there. So I appreciate this.
Yeah, when I first saw this slide, I thought, oh my gosh, this is kind of technical. Let's make this as easy as possible. Generative AI, it generates content. Predictive, it learns and predicts. Perception, it reads and transcribes. And agentic, it's really just an agent or a robot. I want to talk a little bit though about generative AI, generating contents. I mean, this is one of the easiest ways to get into AI. CTE, Chehalis Tribal Enterprises, we use ChatGPT a lot. We use ChatGPT for like preliminary logo design. We use it for social media and marketing campaigns for our restaurant and for our fueling center and convenience store. It's very good on policy and procedure development. You run it through ChatGPT and it'll find where you're missing parts of your policies and procedures to ensure that they're comprehensive. I think it's really a great start to develop content. However, you have to remember that AI is only as good as the information you're feeding into it. It has its limitations. It hallucinates. I mean, it confidently generates content, but sometimes it's based on incorrect information. And let me give you an example, which I thought was pretty funny. One time I was playing around with ChatGPT and I thought, we're going to have, let's just say we design a new breakfast sandwiches for our convenience stores. We're going to design a sandwich that's got a piece of bacon on it, and it's got a sausage patty and an egg, and we want that to look really, really appetizing. But we want to talk about our neck of the woods here. We're in the Pacific Northwest. It can be cold and rainy. We can have misty mountains and misty mornings. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to put all this in the ChatGPT and see what comes out. Well, ChatGPT looked at it and said, okay, a beautiful sandwich. And that's what it did. It gave me this lovely looking sandwich, very appetizing. But it saw behind it that it was Pacific Northwest and it was rainy and it assumed mountains and all that other stuff. And you know what I ended up with? I ended up with a beautiful sandwich held by a wet, brownish, hairy hand attached to a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot. So AI is only as good as the information you feed it, and quite often it'll come out with content that it believes is correct based on its databases, but that's definitely not correct and not what I wanted to see.
No, absolutely. That confidently producing wrong, or maybe that's data that's not what we want, is a key drawback to, especially some early onset generative AI capabilities, or those that are using large language models, which is primarily pulling data that's available on the internet. As we all know, not everything on the internet is true, regardless of what my dad might think at times. And being able to validate that data that you and the outputs before doing any actions off of those is so key.
And some of the other items on here, like perception AI. Perception AI, it's really just it reads. It's really the old system of optical character recognition. It extracts data and puts it into forms. One of the perception AIs that we use a lot is the automated note takers, which I'll talk about a little later. It's one of the easiest ways to get into AI is really automated note taking. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was agentic AI. That's the agent, that's the robot. We come across that every day now. Anyone that calls, say, a large company like Walgreens, they're going to get a voice that comes on the line that says, how can I help you? Well, that's not a human, that's a robot. And that robot is listening to what you say, and it's kind of transcribing it down, and then it's putting you in touch with the right department or the right person. Now, this type of robot is something that's going to take a long time to get into most businesses, because it's complex programming, it's expensive to come up with it. But it's very, very important, these robots nowadays, because in the old days, who would be answering the phones? You'd either have to hire a person to answer the phones, or more likely, such as a Walgreens, you would have a cashier that would be answering the phones. But do you really want a cashier to be answering phones when they're trying to do complex transactions at the register? And wouldn't you rather them be customer facing, talking to your customer, spending a lot more time with that? And the problem with these robots is they are very irritating sometimes. You call Walgreens and it says, how can I help you? And you say pharmacy. And then it says, hey, I can help you with anything you want regarding the pharmacy. And then you say, yeah, I want to change my insurance on my pharmaceuticals. And then it pauses and it hesitates because it doesn't know what you're talking about. And then it has to put you in touch with a live person to be able to go through the rest of what you want. So it can be frustrating too.
And as you're saying there, the key with a lot of this, as you're starting to use these tools, and some of them are just fun, especially in the technology space, to start playing with and seeing what's happening. But is understanding, as you're rolling this into business, is what is the outcome that you're really driving for. And your example there of the cashier, where as more and more things get automated, right? What really can set us apart in business is great customer service. So having that capability for your people that are in person to be able to spend more time customer facing and doing those things rather than managing so many of the tedious tasks can really increase that experience for our customers, for our tribal citizens that are receiving service at our different programs, and really driving for those outcomes that can free up from the administrative tedious tasks to really provide more time for those in-person engagements. So moving away from the types of AI technology that we're seeing in the workplace, sometimes it can be really helpful to think through, to hear what real world examples are in place that may be a little out of the ordinary of the ways that we may be thinking of it. And with that, I want to start with just some great information. I know a number of you attending this are probably very familiar with the TribalNet Conference and Tribal Hub, the organization that provides great learning opportunities through that. They had a great article this past year that documented 3 different ways the tribal governments across Oklahoma here are utilizing AI in a way we might not have thought about before. One of those is language preservation. being able to use AI to capture stories, capture native speakers of their languages, and then you work into that some translations to help engage new, younger citizens or people that are trying to learn their native languages, and interact with it via AI and learn about some of their history along the way. And the Cherokee Nation Health Service, being able to use AI agents in listening to process recordings of conversations, some of what Robert was just talking about, with call centers or aspects like that, but then actually taking that and being able to convert that into clinical documentation. So reducing the amount of time that nurses have to spend on some of those administrative tasks and really increasing the number of patients that they can see and improving the experience of their patients while they're in their centers. And then as well as the Cherokee Nation, being able to analyze the tribal law so people can ask questions to see if maybe things are within law or where there may be concerns with that, or even just make it that much more available and usable to understand things in more of a natural language rather than having to be well versed in legal language to understand the Cherokee Nation law. And Robert, turning to some of our own experience, you talked a little bit about meeting AI. Why don't you give us a little more information about how you all are using AI note takers?
Let me start with one thing first before we get into some of this. One thing that we're looking at specifically is, in terms of AI, is we do not want to rush into AI. You can't just tell AI that, hey, look at this process, look at this policy, what a mess. AI, go in and fix it. AI is going to take what you have. It's really garbage in, garbage out. You have to clean up your data first before you put AI on top of it. I mean, you can imagine you can't have AI work on a policy and procedure or a process unless you know what that process and procedure needs to look like. I mean, AI can help you redesign some of it, but we don't want to have garbage in, garbage out. We want to have really clean processes that we can put AI to be able to manage for us. And then, do you really need AI in all circumstances? What businesses should be doing is you should be eliminating processes, eliminating reports, eliminating things you don't need first before you automate something. And once you're done cleaning up your data, cleaning up your processes, then find something that's repetitious, takes a lot of time, and put AI on it to save you time. And getting to this particular slide, one thing that we looked at first, as CEO, for me, it's very important that we document what we're doing. We have numerous subsidiaries and departments and activities. So one of the first things that we put in place almost a year ago now is an automated meeting note taker. Now, we use Otter AI, but there are a lot of different note takers. And we found immediately how important note taking was in having an automated note taker. So we turn on the automated note taker, and it records a meeting for an hour, and it then transcribes it, and it puts everything into categories. It comes up with action items. And we were amazed the first time we used an automated note taker that it captured most of the action items, about 95% correct, accurate. In fact, it had more action items that I put down when I was doing my own notes. So now we have notes that have been automated, they've been typed up. We now have them as a record of all of our meeting minutes. And in the future, we're going to use AI to be able to comb through all of these notes and this data and pull things that we need to be able to manage our businesses better, because now we have a recorded form so that it can go through and pull things together.
For us as a Alaska Native Corporation, Arctic IT, we're part of the Doyon Alaska Native Corporation, and across our technology group, we've been really looking at how we can use AI agents to help improve some of our processes. As Robert said, we really had to understand what our processes were and where we wanted them to be. And then we're able to create agents to help us on the HR and payroll side, for instance, not only generate job descriptions, screen candidates, and some of those things that are already more readily available, but then also be able to help with reconciliations around where our project staff was putting on their project time cards where they'd taken time off or other things that were necessary for the sake of billing on our government contracts, but then also being able to validate that against our HR systems, time available, and where there, in the past there were different types of reconciliations that spent a lot of manual time. Now we were able to save, as it says there, 30 minutes per performance review, 30 minutes per payroll to help with some of those. And beyond just saving time, it also caught more issues and discrepancies than we ever flagged ourselves when we were doing it manually. And similarly, for my team on the sales and marketing side, we're responding to a lot of RFPs and bids, and then looking at ways of not only using AI agents to help generate some of that content based upon what we've written in the past to allow us to respond to things more quickly, but also good error checking. If we've got 4 or 5 people that are contributing to a large RFP response, we want to make sure that that we're looking for any anomalies, things that maybe didn't sound quite right, or maybe one person said one thing and a different person said thing in a different way. We want to make sure that we are accurate, and it helps us not only respond to things faster, but also with better accuracy and quality. And those were agents that we had created internally, but there are a number of tools available with financial systems and other things already to help with auto reconciliations and other pieces that we're seeing more and more of those AI agents really make an impact within those business applications already. We're excited about those. Now, one thing in conversations I have with tribal nation leaders sometimes is just the fear of talking that AI or using AI is really contradictory to what the mission of especially at the government level themselves. And some of that, understandably, there are very key considerations to take in regards to your tribal sovereignty, in regards to your culture and history, and where you do not want technology to be part of that. But when you really think about, especially when it comes to the service delivery aspects of a tribal nation, you're working with your citizens to provide different levels of services and everything. That's where we see technology and community goals really aligning well with one another. You mentioned the idea of chatbots and things earlier. We already talked, Robert, talked a little bit about language translation support, but even being able to doing more surveillance and watching for issues. There have been more and more security systems are weaving AI in to be able to identify potential issues and flag people to help maybe across the healthcare facilities, things like that. Tribal law search and summaries, as we've already talked about, contract reviews, and then really just back office administration excellence with improving the quality of the work and being able to do it more quickly and with fewer resources. So for those that have been a little bit nervous to really start using AI because of concerns that it really conflicts with our tribal sovereignty and community goals, picking the right lanes and areas to really improve your mission and your goals of your programs and providing that top quality service, AI can really help align with that. And so it's really important to start looking into or thinking through areas where it could be beneficial for you all as you move forward. Now, with that, we're moving into what we call the myth busting discussion. But as you'll see, it's not all busting the myths. There are some aspects where there's a lot of yes and no's that we see in regards to that. So some of this is similar to, I'm going to be asking Robert some of these questions, and some of these came from things that we've heard ourselves when talking with our customers, but also aspects that sometimes just talking with my mother-in-law, who is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne Sioux tribe in South Dakota. She is really trying to understand AI because she's a medical transcriptionist and has been worried about what that might mean in her role. And so some of the questions that she had asked me were wove into this discussion as well, because it is so impactful for the people across organizations. So with that, Robert, one of the most common questions or fears that we hear in regards to AI is AI going to take my job?
No, yes, and maybe. Let's go way back and look at phone operators. There used to be a bunch of phone operators in a room, and those phone operators would be plugging in various phone lines. Then you had automatic switching came in, and you didn't need those phone operators anymore. Well, they just transitioned into other jobs. Then computers came out, and then software for Word and email, and there used to be rooms full of typists. Well, you don't need typists anymore. We all do our own email, and we do our own letters now. Those jobs also transitioned. Now, there's a lot of people that'll tell you, though, that with AI, never has technology changed this rapidly. And if you look in the news, you'll hear H&R Block is cutting 10,000 jobs. You hear that AI is doing amazing things in accounting and tax, legal research. And there's a lot of people that are very, very worried. There was something in the paper the other day about 50% of new college graduates going into white collar jobs won't be needed. Now, but let's think about this in terms of tribal nations. Will some jobs change? Yes, they will. AI will take some of the repetitive tasks, and it can do it faster and quicker. It's going to free up, a lot of our people, but we're not H&R Block. We don't have 10,000 people that we can let go. A lot of us are in tribes or in rural communities. I've got about 20, 25 people just in our administrative department. I mean, how many people can I cut with AI? In fact, I wouldn't cut anyone because they'd be transitioning into other roles. If I'm going to cut somebody that's spending all their time doing transactional processing, because AI is taking over for that, I can use that individual for more of an analysis role, someone that I really need. So I think that certain jobs are going to change or be lessened, but I don't think for a lot of tribal nations, AI is really going to cut a lot of our jobs. We have a lot of tribal members working for us. I'm not going to be cutting those jobs. I may be changing their job. I'd be more worried if I work for a large company in a large metropolitan area than I would be if I was a tribal leader.
Very good point. For my mother-in-law, if she's working on transitioning into medical coding and billing, rather than primarily on the transcription side, because so many things are being automated with the tools we talked about, the perceptive AI tools we talked about earlier. This one could be a little bit tricky, but is AI all-knowing?
It's interesting. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty and anxiety that people have about AI. AI is following algorithms. It lacks the ability to think independently or possess intentions. I mean, it can make mistakes. It can have biased outputs. AI isn't all-knowing. And here's one example we just talked about the other day I thought was quite interesting, is that look at a lot of tribes. A lot of tribal history is oral. It's not written down. AI doesn't have a database of your tribe's history. In fact, if you looked at a Wikipedia page for almost every tribe, look how many incorrect things there are that are written, or lack of information. And AI can be very biased, about tribes. It's looking at historical documents that it has and books, but it doesn't have the tribal perspective. So AI is not all-knowing. It's only as good as the databases that it's referencing.
That's a very good point. And I know when we think about how AI interacts or thinks or interprets data, there is also a big difference between most of the common tools that we'll be using or those that are being designed for deep research or very specific things, at large research laboratories or aspects. And for them, it may be very, very quick in thinking and using some human-like intuition but that is a very different scenario as well than what we have access to with ChatGPT or similar types of tools. Now, here's one that I know brings a lot of considerations just around tribal data sovereignty. Can AI support that?
Matt, you talked about this before. I mean, look at tribes. Tribes have a lot of very confidential data, tribal enrollment databases, they have the tribal healthcare system, the tribal court system, the GWE programs, a lot of very confidential information. You don't want to have AI that's looking at those databases that also connects with the outside world. So in terms of data sovereignty, we really got to be careful where things are stored. If you remember in the past, everybody was very worried about the cloud and having things stored out in the cloud, especially if it was tribal database related. The only real example that I can provide is that for like our Otter AI, we essentially record conversations so that it can take the minutes. But we immediately, as soon as we have the minutes and the action items, we delete that conversation. We don't want a record of a conversation out there on the cloud. Now, you could say that, well, you never truly delete anything that's on the cloud. Yes, that's correct, but we're trying to do whatever we can to ensure that a lot of the confidential information and discussions we have, are not accessible by anyone else. And as time goes on and we use ChatGPT more and more, we want to use it as a data source, but we don't want it to be taking our data out there to the cloud so that other people can be using it. We've got to be very careful with that.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. We'll go into a little bit more of that here in just a couple of slides, because really where your data is stored and how your data is used is paramount when you're evaluating the types of AI tools you may want to use. And I know because of some of those fears, it's very common for folks to just sit back and say, let's wait and see what others do, and then we'll go from there and decide if we want to use it. What are your thoughts on that?
Technology disruption doesn't wait for slow adapters. Like I said, the first thing that's important is to really clean up your data, right? You have to have good data quality. You have to have good policies and procedures before you put AI in charge of something. In the old days, to save time, you would have all these different integrations, right? You'd have one software system and say your accounting system, and you'd spend a lot of money to have it integrated so that data would flow from one place to another. And a lot of times that was just too expensive. Now AI can do that a lot cheaper, and a lot faster. So that is really going to change a lot of our processes as time goes on. So do we need to wait for others to adopt AI first? I don't think that AI really gives some tribes a real competitive advantage.
Right.
But I wouldn't wait too long. Again, the most important thing that I would do is to clean up our data and identify what your people are spending a lot of time on, all this transactional, time-consuming, data entry. You really need to evaluate that, because that's the first thing we're going to put AI on solving. And once it can take away all that time-consuming data entry, then you can turn more of your staff into analysts, looking at your data, reviewing data, and then implementing what they find into running your companies and your businesses better, or your tribal government better.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Thank you, Robert. And within that, want to borrow a little bit of information, as we've talked about. As a note, Robert, especially as someone with such a strong accounting background, you shared some of this with me, and information that I completely agree with. That part of the ICPA, or the AICPA, excuse me, Association for the CPAs across the United States here, put out some really great information on things to understand when adopting an AI product. So as we're thinking about which AI tools are a good fit for our tribe or our tribal business, how do we want to implement these? real 5 key things to understand and be willing to ask. Make sure that you feel comfortable with the answers you're getting from that vendor that has a tool available that you're considering. And as Robert, as you have alluded to a number of times, one of the most important, if not the most important thing there, is understanding where does your data go. One is where's your data stored to begin with, your original data source. For instance, if you're using a financial system, and where is your transaction data stored that is going to be used by these AI tools? For some of you, maybe on your own servers, doing that. Others who may already be utilizing a cloud service, and just knowing where that data is. But then beyond where the data is, which doesn't have to change with AI, because your tools can connect to where that already is. So if you have data that you want to stay on your tribal land or within your specific Microsoft tenant to make sure it doesn't go from there, there are a lot of options with that. But then what happens with your data that it uses as part of this? And the data can be 2 different things: your actual information that it's gathering from maybe your systems and those sets, but also information that you're uploading as or putting into the AI tool. Great example would be with ChatGPT, if or similar tools. If you're utilizing the free, public versions of that, most of the time, if you upload a spreadsheet, for instance, and say, please help me analyze this, create some nice looking graphics, you let me know any issues or anomalies that you find with that. If you're not careful, that data may then be usable and be part of now the AI data set. Most of the time, if you have a paid subscription to one of those, there are organizational settings within that can say, do not use my data with anything. Just answer the questions I have. But it's not taking that data necessarily to any other spot that it can be used by other organizations. But the questions that you ask, the prompts that you put into may or may not be within that. So when you think about what you're using, what you're saying, the data providing, it's so important to be able to ask of those vendors or do some research to find out how your data is used, both at rest and as it's going through the process, so you understand and feel comfortable with what needs to happen from that. And maybe, as Robert said, have a process in place to reduce the likelihood of there being issues, like deleting the meeting recordings when they're done. Now, if you're implementing a tool that has AI as part of it, we see advertisements for this stuff all the time. One of the ones we're most familiar with at Arctic IT are the Microsoft products. So Microsoft Dynamics ERP solutions, for instance, there's a lot of AI tools built within it. So within that, as you're implementing those, it's good to gain clarity on why AI is used inside the product. Where is it used? And again, what happens with that data? So for instance, it may be just summarizing history of a vendor, so you can quickly see the type of a summary of the business you've done with that vendor over the past year. Maybe other questions you have like that, and understanding that if none of the data goes anywhere, then maybe that's fine. Are there other types of things within that you are less comfortable with, or you're less familiar with what might happen, that you just need to gain more information about that product? And more, especially for those within the government contracting space. Like I know a lot of native enterprises have some level of federal or other government contracting companies. Within that, more and more we hear about things like SOC 2 reports and CMMC compliance. So especially if you're doing government contracting and you need to be able to understand the level that has of different sorts of compliance that your tools or vendors have, asking about SOC 2 compliance is important. And the AICPA has some great content on that, or what to look about through that. But know that not all SOC 2 compliance is the same, understanding the scope of what's there. And within that, if you get those reports, AI can help you maybe make sense of those, understand and look where there may be some aspects of that. But also talking with your auditors that can maybe help provide some clarity on that, especially if it's a very important system for you all that could impact how you deliver services under government contracts, and how that could potentially impact your own compliance that may be required by your customers. And with that, some of the tools are getting more and more expensive as AI is requiring more and more data centers to be built. There's pros and cons of all of that for sure. So with that, if there's a tool that you like, especially if they're telling you it's pretty plug and play, ask for a trial period where you can validate some of your own testing, especially with data that maybe you're not, that is you're less sensitive or that you're less concerned with the outcomes of that, just to be able to try, see what kind of hallucinations are coming back, with that hallucinations being wrong information where AI is making stuff up based upon what it sees as a trend, and really being able to validate that before you start utilizing, before you buy into it, and before you start using any sensitive information, be information of customers, clients, things like that. Use a trial period and validate and test with your own data if at all possible. And then the final thing, and this kind of goes throughout, is really evaluating vendor transparency. If you're asking questions like this, your AI vendor should be able to give you clear questions on it, clear responses to those. A lot of them, at least the biggest ones, will have this documentation ready to go and be able to quickly provide that for you. And also be able to help understand how it impacts your own AI use policies that you may have, or if you don't have, are considering, and being able to go forward with that. And then finally, this last one is important. You think through, in the past, it's very common now to, as part of a large your technology project, to make sure you understand who's accountable if there's an issue, if there's a data breach. There's oftentimes lots of different your language already about what happens in the event of a breach, but starting to see more about what could happen or who's accountable for if AI is wrong. If AI makes a wrong decision, it gives you wrong responses, and you make business decisions on that are incorrect, that sort of thing. Being able to ask questions for that. I mean, as you can imagine, most are going to say you have those, we cannot be held responsible, but making sure that you are clear within that, or where there's some gray areas around that, to make sure that that you understand what you're getting into contractually as well, just like you would maybe with cybersecurity type concerns. And finally, as we've talked about various recommendations, especially when it comes to data throughout, other common pitfalls that we see and we recommend avoiding, when it comes to AI. One of the things that we've seen and a number of times is when an organization might say, we do not use AI. AI is not allowed. The difficulty with that is, one, it's hard to police and make sure that that isn't happening, especially with more and more organizations allowing people to work from home from time to time. And it's hard to truly be able to monitor every piece of technology that people are using. Because what most often happens when you ban it entirely is that users will end up using some AI tools in an unsafe way. Maybe just using the public available chat GPTs or other things like that, and uploading sensitive information without realizing what they're doing, and therefore you're putting yourself at risk. So maybe rather than banning it entirely, is one, having an AI use policy, and then setting up some safe lanes and parameters for how it can be used. Maybe investing in some of those over-the-counter tools initially in some certain areas like Otter AI, like Robert was saying, to really help, because chances are they're going to use it regardless. So let's set up some safe ways for them to do so. And without repeating a bunch of what we've said in the past, you're truly making sure you understand where your data is and how it's going to be used and how it can impact your security and sovereignty, right, is such a key part with that. And another pitfall, and Robert touched on this a little bit earlier, is starting, a pitfall can be if you start with a technology instead of a problem. If you don't know what you want to achieve or what your process is that you're trying to really help automate, because you've done some of that research, and instead you just say, well, we bought this tool, how do we want to use it now? You're going about it the wrong way, right? So first, understanding the key processes or the areas where you see that automation could truly help, and then finding the right tool for the issue rather than the other way around. And don't need to repeat this too much. Robert has done a good job of touching on this, but poor input data, if garbage in, garbage out, is so true within any system, but in particular with AI, because it will tell you with confidence that it thinks it's right, where your data in and of itself could just be wrong. And in the end, be very careful with the types of decisions you try to automate. Where we're seeing this be possible and also very helpful in things can be the automation of approving certain types of transactions. If you think about accounts payable automation is an area that's had a lot of growth over the last 10 years. And there may be very good reasons to be able to allow the system to double check for some things. Is it under a certain dollar amount? Does it meet certain thresholds of accuracy that you established ahead of time? And that may make sense to automate and have it go through and auto approve going on to the next step. But getting to the point where it's fully sending out the dollars, you may want to consider looking at that a little bit closer before you fully automate that. And especially if you're making decisions that can truly have impact on people's lives, right? Within medicine, we see this a lot now, making sure that there's a human in the loop, as they call it, that before any prescriptions are done, even if AI is recommending certain things, that there is that proper oversight before an important decision is made, and not just fully lean into the automation. Now with that, this is more of a call to a reminder that within the GoToMeeting tool here, under the materials, there is a great opportunity to download the slide deck. There's some additional recommendations for how to get started here with it, with things like drafting an AI policy and establishing what your goals through that, then launching some controlled pilots, just kind of summarizing some of what we've already talked about and how you want to roll those out. And a lot of that does truly start with that AI policy. So if you don't have one in place, some of the generative AI tools can make great recommendations to help you get started and things to consider. But as well, please feel free to let us know if you want some help with that. We've got some great examples of things that we've helped some customers with that may be a great starting point for you, and to just provide complimentary assessment to help you get started with some of those things. So please, as you're leaving, if you're not sure where some of those first steps could be, let us know. There's a number of things that we can help you via complimentary assessment to really get you on your way. Now, before we go into questions, is where we've got just about up to 10 minutes left here. On the screen here in just a second, we're going to be posting a poll just to get some feedback on where are you in your AI journey. So we should see that popping up on our screen here. And through that as well, start thinking through any questions that you may want to ask here, as when our poll rounds out here, we will be taking some questions. So letting us know, do you just want a copy of the AI policy template? We'd be happy to follow up with that. We're happy to go a little bit further with that AI assessment as well, maybe training. If there's other things that you'd like some information on with ongoing events and webinars that Arctic IT will be hosting, we'd be glad to make sure that you are aware of those things. And at this point, if you don't need any help, any follow-ups from there, again, please just take a minute here to review this and let us know how we can help you or not help you, depending on what you need to be most successful as you start contemplating your AI journey here. As well, if anyone on this is going to be attending the NAFOA conference in Reno next week, and Robert, you said you're going to be there quickly for just a day or so on some things. I should be there for the whole time. We'd love to have a conversation with you if you have any follow-up questions or things there. We get the opportunity to run into each other. All right, so it looks like the poll here is wrapping up. So with that, we can close that and then move on to any questions. So Cherie, do we have any submitted through the to GoToMeeting at this point?
Yes, we do. We have 3 of them here so far. First
Great.
one being for Robert from Jill. When you use AI Note Taker, do you have to let staff know that you're using it just as a courtesy?
Yes. I mean, you need to let everybody, you need to get everybody's assent, agreement that it's okay to use an automated note taker. And for people that are new to the meetings, I will explain to them that our process is that it records, and the only reason it records is we're trying to get the automatic note taker to transcribe it. And as soon as I've got meeting minutes, we delete those conversations. You really have to announce to people that you are recording. I mean, not everybody wants to be recorded, even though no one said no after we've told them the reason why we're doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. This question probably for Matt regarding data sovereignty. Are you aware of any efforts or platforms that are allowing people to run LLMs on tribally owned or sovereign infrastructure?
So the way a lot of that is being done right now is it's called MCP, and I'm trying to think, I think it's the Model Context Protocol, if I'm remembering that correctly. But what a lot of systems are doing is essentially allowing an intermediary service to kind of bring in what you have with LLM. So a great example would be, I know on the Microsoft Copilot, that's one I'm most familiar with, is it allows you to point Copilot using Copilot Studio or some other tool within that at wherever whether that's on-prem or information within your Microsoft tenant, where that data resides, and it leaves it there, doesn't do anything else with that. But then the other part of it is it can utilize what's available within the LLM to help combine those and combine that data and respond to questions. So it leaves that data all within your tenant or your own database or whatever tool that you're doing, but also connects with a large language model to then combine kind of the best of both worlds with that. And so there are a number of tools that have that out there, but that MCP, the Model Context Protocol, if I'm remembering the acronym, is growing in use across different business applications to try to combine those in a safe way without having to touch or move, without having to move or do anything really with the source data that you own and have full control over.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, and this next one is from George. Will future federal or state funding require tribes to share generated tribal AI information with the funding agencies that may have impacts to privileged data the tribe wants to restrict?
I'm not aware of any specific motions in play for that. And truly where I think a lot of it comes down to is, as of this point, nothing we've seen is requiring that data to be any different because of the use of AI. So right now, I know for some like grants, for instance, you may have to respond back with certain outcomes of this is how many people came to our clinic. These are how many people received these sorts of child welfare services, various things like that. So that those same metrics and stuff, I'm sure will be required, especially for the outcome of it, and then seeing how that's been used. I don't see any of that changing with the tools in place. Now, could it be, if there are aspects of looking for extra verification to make sure that you're not using AI to maybe falsify that or make some things up without realizing that maybe there were errors within that. I'm not aware of that being the case, but doesn't mean there won't be more of that as growth of these tools comes in, and especially if the funding agencies are starting to use more AI to gather the feedback or the data back from the reporting agencies. I'm not aware of what they are promising to do or not do with the data that you provide. But again, that shouldn't really change that much from what they're requiring now. There just may be additional agreements required or understanding of how they're going to process that data that they receive from you.
Gotcha, thank you. Hopefully that answered your question, George. Got another one just now from Jeff. Does Arctic IT have AI embedded in any of its tools? One example would be reading invoices for AP, which I believe you did mention earlier, Matt.
Yes, again, for us, as we are so focused on the Microsoft expertise there, a number of the Microsoft business applications do have a number of tools available that you can turn on or turn off if you're using the application and you don't want. In the accounting side in particular, there's lots of those. And within that, for instance, you do have the ability to turn them on and off. So there is a difference depending upon if you're within what Microsoft calls the government community cloud or the GCC versus the standard commercial cloud and what those AI functions are. But you're absolutely correct that AP automation is one of those. As Robert said earlier, that OCR functionality has been around for a long time to read invoices and automate things through. Now that's just taking a big step forward with AP to be able to learn from corrections and do that better in the future, and maybe make some guesses with confidentiality confidence scores to let you know how confident the computer feels like, or the AI feels like the decisions or the matches, stuff that it finds in the reconciliations are correct, and be able to build on those confidence scores based upon the feedback that you give it as the end user. And so I think there's going to be a growing set of those, especially over your higher tiered solutions that are available out there with lots of AI options to help. But there again, the best ones allow you to choose whether or not you want to use those and turn them on or off if it's not a function that you're comfortable with or that you feel really automates something that's important to you.
Awesome, thank you. And this last one, not really a question, just a nice comment from Carla. Thank you for providing this information and conversation. You're both great presenters. This was very helpful and gave me a lot to think about. So I think that's a great way to wrap this up. Thank you, Carla, and everyone that stayed on with us today. We had a full house, so appreciate you all attending. I just want to add before we conclude, I do want to share there is a 2-question, very short, very fast survey at the end. All it is asking, hey, did you get something out of this? And what can we do to keep providing content that you're interested in and want to hear more about? So Matt, Robert, thank you so much. This was fabulous. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Everyone have a great rest of your week. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Bye.